Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Heavenly Stairway, and I'm going to be sipping on some coffee. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, cobalt blue, Mars black, burnt umber, which I will call brown, and chrome orange. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk that I'll be using for a little bit of drawing later. And I also have two brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush, and I have a number 1 round synthetic brush. And I will refer to these as small and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch those up too if you'd like to. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the same type of paint and brushes, and even the piece of chalk will be in there for you. So that's down there. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting, so you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to be painting the background. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are white, blue, and black. And what I'm in essence going to do is I'm going to make myself a really pretty dark blue color, and then I'm going to add a little bit of white to it up at the top of my sky and have a gradient so it gets nice and dark as it comes down towards the bottom, and we'll get it to go a little bit darker at the bottom. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to pre-mix myself a dark blue color. So I've pre-mixed it so you can see where I'm headed. This is about the shade of blue that I'm going for. And how I got there was I took my blue and added a tiny bit of black paint to it. The black will really, let me turn this up, goes a little bit easier to view. The black will turn the blue dark really quickly, so you don't want to add the black really fast, just a little tiny dot at a time till you get it as dark as you want it. And you also want to mentally kind of plan for this blue to get a little bit darker as it dries on your canvas. So I'm just going to make sure this is as dark as I want it, maybe a touch darker in through here. And then once you've got the shade that you want, this is looking pretty good to me. Once you've gotten the shade that you want, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe my brush off on the side of my palette, and I'm going to pick up some white paint. So I have that dark blue plus white paint on my brush. This is how I'm going to start the top of my canvas. I'm going to start the top with this lighter version of the blue, so I can have a gradual kind of transition down into a darker blue sky as it comes down my canvas. And then I'm going to pick up my, without washing my brush, I'm picking up some of that custom blue that we made to come down my canvas. I'm going to get it to blend in with that lighter section in through here. And then I'm going to utilize the majority of the rest of this canvas is going to be with that custom blue color that we created. So I'll get it to go a little bit darker down at the bottom, but right now I'm just kind of going to do the majority of it in this custom blue that we did. I'm going left to right. I think I'm going to add I want to get this little section up here. So I am going back into the white just a little bit so I can make sure that this transition happens the way that I want it to. So I'm just looking for a nice kind of gentle gradient from that lighter tone down into this darker tone down below. You might find that you want yours to be even lighter than mine. That's going to be a personal preference on your part. We are going to be having a lot of beautiful clouds and the stairs and all kinds of other information on top of this. So we don't really need it to be perfect at this moment, and it doesn't even have to be the perfect shade of blue either. Again, because we're going to be adding so much on top of it, this is really just providing us with a nice background that will be able to incorporate all of our heavenly elements on top of. So as I get down towards this bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm bringing this custom blue all the way down to the bottom, and then once I've got it painted in, I'm going to add a touch of black to it, so it'll bring it into just a little bit darker down at the bottom, so it'll give us that progression of it being kind of in focus, or having some more dimension to it down at the bottom of the canvas, and then it'll drift off into the distance as it goes up towards the top. So I've got it all colored in. So what I'm going to do now, just before I start adding black to my brush, I'm going to just kind of go back and forth, make sure I've got all of my little spots colored in. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and add a touch of black to my brush without washing my brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of black paint, and I'm going to start down at the bottom and just kind of get this to blend in with that blue paint. You don't need to bring it up too high. This is just going to give you that element of dimension down at the bottom, especially underneath those stairs, because that's where we'll be seeing the most of this background. And then once you've got this done, we will be utilizing our chalk for the next step. So you can just put your large brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to draw an outline for our staircase. So I do recommend that you have your canvas dry before you start this step. So this is when you get to take that extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry. Or you can do as I did and just whip out a blow dryer to get it dry that way. I'm going to be using my chalk to create this outline for my staircase. You could certainly use any drawing utensil that you want. I'm outlining it because I like to really have my mind set, especially when doing something like this with a lot of perspective in it. If I just went ahead and attacked it with paint, I might get carried away and not have the perspective I want. So that's why I'm choosing to draw it out. You could certainly just paint it if you wanted to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of markers where I want the bottom of my staircase to go and where I want it to end, and then we'll make a couple of outlines on the outside. So on the bottom left-hand side of my canvas, I'm going to come up about an inch and give myself a little bit of a marker in through here. And then on the bottom right-hand side of my canvas, I'm going to come in about, I would say about 2 to 3 inches and make myself a little marker there. So that's going to represent the widest part at the bottom of my staircase. It's going to disappear off into the heavenly skies in this area up atop my canvas here. So I'm gonna, if this is the center of the top of my canvas, and this is about quarter way between those two, you can come down maybe about, I would say 4 inches or so, and then over to the right just a little bit. So I'm right about here. You don't have to be exactly where I am, but that's where I've chosen to put mine, so you can put yours in a relatively similar spot if you want. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this dot to this bottom left, as well as this dot to the bottom right. I'm going to do the left-hand side first. I want my staircase to be really wide down at the bottom and very narrow up at the top. So I'm just going to start with a slender line coming over here. I'm going to curve it, I would say right about in through here, and then just kind of bring it down a little bit, maybe curve it back inwards a little bit. And then once you've got that going on, you can just kind of do a long sloping type of curve out to this bottom end over here. I'm going to do a similar curve on the right hand side. Starting up here, it's going to be very, very thin. I'm not even going to have it separated from my line here. I'll start to separate it right about here, and then it'll get wider and wider as it comes out towards here. So I'm going to start up in through here. I'm going to give it this similar type of curve in through here, and then I will bump it out quite a bit out over on this right hand side, and then I'll bring it back in, and you can just kind of scoop it like that in through there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself steps or markers where I want each step to go. Clearly up at the top it'll be too small for us to mark, but these big steps down at the bottom, I want to be able to give them a progression of them being bigger and then getting smaller and smaller. So all I'm going to really do is give myself a little bit of a mark where I want the top of the step, or the back part of the top of the step, to go. So I'm going to come up from the bottom about 1/2 of an inch to an inch. This is going to be the top of my first step. Then I'm going to go about 2 inches above that, make a little bit, another marker. And then every time I go up another step, I'm going to get shorter and shorter. So I'm going to go here, here, and you don't even have to do them at an angle like I'm doing. You can just really kind of freestyle it and then just step back and see if you've in fact have them bigger here and then smaller up at the top. When you get into this region up and through here, there's really not a ton of detail to it. I'm just kind of making little polka dots that are kind of close enough together. And that's all I'm going to be doing for my staircase outline. So we're going to be using our large brush for the next step. So you can put your chalk away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint our staircase. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm going to be using are my dark blue, white, maybe a little bit of brown, and a little bit of black too, but I'll call them out as I'm going to use them. So what I first want to do is I want to put the flat part of the top part of the step on first, and then we'll kind of manipulate it after that. But I really want these to look like they're cloudy steps, so I'm going to be using very little bit of paint on my brush, and I'm going to be using like a scrubbing type of technique just to get them nice and soft and airy looking. And then as I get up towards the top, I'm going to be using my bristle brush, but you might find when you get to these smaller little steps that you want to utilize your small brush. So if you feel that you want to switch throughout the process, feel free to do so. And just know that when we're doing these, they don't have to be perfect. They're clouds forming into this staircase. But the one thing that I do want to kind of suggest is that you try and keep them horizontal. When we're doing this curved type of line, our brain wants us to make it look like a roller coaster and have the lines kind of tipped whatever way that curve is going. So if you can kind of keep yourself in a horizontal way, it'll make it look a little bit more natural. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a teeny bit of my dark blue and a teeny bit of white paint on my brush. And a very little bit. You hardly need any paint on your brush at all. This bottom step is going to be the first one that I do. I'm going to bring it right up to my line and get rid of my chalk line. And I'm just going to kind of loosely rub it out in this scrubbing type of technique. And again, I want it to look airy, so that's why I'm not using a lot of paint on my brush. I just reloaded my brush with a little bit of blue, the dark blue, and my white. And then when I go to this next line, I'm only going to do it about, the width of it is going to be about half the distance between here and here. So I'm going to start up at the top like this. I'm going to give myself the top part of the step. And then when I come to bring it down here, I'm only going to go about halfway to that next line. I think I'm going to add a little bit more white so we can see this a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. And I'm bringing it all the way out to my chalk mark, the left and the right side of the chalk mark. So that way, when I go to paint in my clouds, I've got my exterior clouds, I'll be able to kind of morph them in nice and gently. So again, just a little bit of that dark blue and a touch of white, not a lot, just giving myself this bit of airiness on here, maybe a touch more white paint to give myself a little bit more softness to it. And then you might not even need to reload your brush as you work your way up the steps, but again, check yourself every now and again. You can even use your brush as a measuring tool to see how high up the right hand side is. I'm checking myself right now and go to the left side and see if it's up a little bit, or if it's at the same height. So I'm feeling like I'm pretty close. I might be tipping it a little bit, so I'm going to just give myself a little bit of an adjustment here. And that's I just know that that's the way that my brain works as I'm going through these through this type of exercise where I've got these exterior wavy lines, my brain just wants to make my my other lines nice and wavy too. So I just know that that's the way my brain works, and sometimes it's similar to the way others works as well. So I'm just going to kind of keep going in through here, and you can see I'm just using this little kind of rubbing technique. I'm going smaller and smaller as I'm going towards these other steps, just going left to right. Right now I'm just kind of moving my brush. I'm not really circling it, just kind of giving myself a little bit of a marker. I'm going to bring it out towards that chalk mark, make sure I have it out far enough, and then just reloading my brush to get these last few up in through here. Now I know that my chalk mark is going to be eliminated altogether at some point, so that's why I'm kind of making sure I kind of go over it a little bit. We can erase it with some pencil in or some water in a little bit. So right now, just kind of getting my little steps in here using the corner of my brush. Sometimes the corner of your brush works well too. And I am concentrating on utilizing some of that blue as well, because I don't want to go fully white on them yet, because we're going to be adding some highlights to them in a little bit. And if I go fully white right now, I won't be able to see those highlights later. So as I get up into here, I'm really just probably gonna at some point be doing these little dots of sorts, but just making sure that I've got some kind of representation of the step going up in through this direction. And we'll be, like I said, we're gonna put highlights and little details and stuff on it in a little bit, but this is just kind of getting the stair party started. So we are going to be utilizing this large brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, maybe I think I'm going to widen this one just a little bit. I feel like these bottom two should be a little bit wider. But once you get this step done, you're going to wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be doing the base coat for our clouds. So I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. I'm going to be using black, dark blue, brown, and white. And really what I'm looking to do is have it nice and dark down at the bottoms and kind of making it go lighter and lighter as it goes towards that light source and towards the top of my stairwell. So I'm going to be using all colors darker down here and kind of just working my way towards lighter and lighter. We're going to be doing a highlight on these clouds in a future step, so don't worry if they're not perfect at this point. We're just really kind of putting them in place and trying to start that gradient of them being darker, having them morph into the steps a little bit, and then getting lighter and lighter as they go up. I'm going to be reserving a big area in through here where I'm not going to have any clouds. This will be where my light source is, and that'll kind of be beaming out. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of my dark blue plus a teeny bit of black paint. I don't want a lot of black paint, just a teeny tiny bit, and I'm going to start kind of working from the outside and working in. I'm going to be using this circular type of brush stroke. I want to do a second layer on all of this background so it really looks nice and airy and fluffy as it's coming towards the steps. I'm going to be getting rid of my chalk marks throughout this process, and then I will, if we have any remnants of chalk marks left over, we can certainly get rid of those when we do our highlights. But right now I just have a little bit of blue and black on my brush, the dark blue and the black, and then as I work my way up and towards these steps, I'm going to start getting a little bit lighter. So I like to utilize the brown as I'm getting lighter and lighter, so that way it adds a bit of warmth to my clouds as well and has a lot of luminescent type of value. So I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm going to pick up a bit of my brown just with the remnants that I have on my brush and start getting some of this darker shades within these exterior areas in through here. So really I'm just kind of using this scrubbing type of effect in through here to make sure that I have this nice soft appearance as we're going in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start without washing my brush. I'm going to be getting these clouds to go lighter and lighter as they go up. So I will be using my dark blue and white to accomplish that, but I'm also going to pre-mix myself a light tan color. So actually I am going to wash my brush, so I don't have blue on my brush right now. I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to pre-mix myself a tan color. So this tan is going to help me not use white. I'm going to kind of improvise my lightest areas with this tan color so we can reserve white for later when we really want to do a bright, bright highlight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my brown and I'm going to add a bunch of white to it. I really just want it to be this light tan type of a color. I'll be utilizing this in my light source as well, but I just want it to be something that is darker than white. So this way it helps me to progressively get lighter as I'm going towards those white areas. So this is looking pretty good to me. It definitely is a little bit darker than white, but it's not super duper brown, and it will help me to add these lighter versions on here. So I'm just going to kind of wipe my brush off on my paper towel so I don't have too much of it. And then I'm going to pick up a bit of my dark blue plus that light tan color. So now that I've got this lighter version on my brush, I can start to intermingle it with my cloud, with my stairs, in where the stair comes across. You can kind of blend it right into that a little bit. Think clouds. This is fluffy, airy. I'm using this scrubbing effect, allowing these colors to kind of intermingle with one another. You don't have to do every single step the same way. You can get this airiness to kind of intermingle with a bunch of the stairs if you want to. I'm trying to get rid of some of my chalk mark, and if you want to, you can just pick up some more of your dark blue to get that to kind of make sure that the chalk mark is gone. So whatever method that you have to getting rid of that chalk mark, feel free to do so. And then I just kind of am working my way towards the lighter area, which is going to be up top, but I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of this cloudiness over on the edges of my steps. And you can see I'm not going really bright, bright white, and this is going to, again, help me to get that beautiful airiness to the sky colors. And then I'm going to I just added a bit more of that light tan plus a touch of blue. You can at any time pick up brown if you wanted to, or black, in order to get some more dimension in it, but right now this is working out pretty well for me. So I'm going to make sure that I've got this whole area up in through here. And again, I hardly have any paint on my brush, so this is really just adding that atmospheric layer to the sky in through here. I have to be careful that I kind of control myself in this area. So I'm going to have my clouds stopping, I would say right about here where the bend starts to happen in the stairway. I just picked up a little bit more paint so I can get this to visually happen so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm starting to slow down so I can really control where I put these little bits of the clouds around the edges. I'm going to have this maybe coming up in through here, and then maybe we'll have a big area coming up over here. So it looks like these clouds are kind of encapsulating this beautiful area that the light is going to be shining from. I just reloaded my brush a little bit more so I can kind of get this over on this side to wrap around this side as well. So just a little bit in through here, and you'll find that you'll get your groove with how you want the clouds to kind of intermingle with those steps. And again, we're going to have another layer to it. You can see I'm leaving some dark areas too, so that way we've got a lot of dimensional elements to these clouds. And again, I'm not picking up white paint. That's going to be my real trick as I go through this, is not to pick up white. I'm utilizing that tan color, that light tan color, in order to get these clouds to just really start to emerge without being too invasive at this point. This is just allowing me to get that little bit of texture and of the placement of them, I guess, and then just kind of letting this fade out into the darkness in through here. And again, right now I'm just using that scrubbing type of technique. I just picked up a little bit of my tan plus a touch of brown, as well, so I can get a little bit more of some different tonal values in the clouds over and through here, which is a great way to just add a little bit more dimension. If you're finding it's looking a little bit flat, you can certainly use a little bit of that brown just to add a little bit more deepness or richness to it. And then I'm just kind of playing with these edges just a bit more, making sure that it really kind of works well with my steps. And again, doesn't have to be perfect at this point because we're going to be giving it some final little highlights with the lighter versions in a little bit. So again, this is just kind of getting my placement going. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my dark blue to make sure that my chalk is kind of fully disappeared around here, and I'll even use a little bit of this up in my stairwell. So I'm going to put a touch of that dark blue just so I can get rid of this chalk. You could do the same thing with a little bit of water if you wanted to. If you still had a little bit of your chalk evident, you could just use a little bit of water. I'm just using the background color to get it to go away for me, but you could certainly utilize water or whatever you wanted. And then we're going to be utilizing this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this base coat for your beautiful clouds on here, you can wash and dry. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. That's going to be a good start for us. You can wash and dry this big brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint our heavenly light. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm going to use are that tan color that we created and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be using very little bit of paint to create the area where I want this light source to be coming from. And I'm going to rub it out so it's the brightest in the middle and then it fades out. I'm going to do this with the tan color, and then I'm going to come back and accentuate the center with white. So I'm going to be using a very tiny bit of that tan color on my brush. You can always add more, but I recommend just starting with a little bit and seeing how that works out for you. So I have very little bit on my brush, and I'm gonna not go directly on the end of my stairway. I'm gonna go up and to the right just a little bit. So I'm gonna start up and through here, and then I'm just gonna kind of rub it out. And then as I start feeling like my brush is running out of paint, then I'll most likely just start doing this rubbing type of technique to just kind of get it to really work itself into the surrounding area. You might find that you want to add more, and if that's the case, so be it. I'm going to just work with this initially, and if I feel like I want to amp it up anymore, like I do feel like I want to amp it up a little more, sometimes, again, it's better to start slowly and then just add more as you go. So I just added a bit more onto my brush so I can get it to spread out a little bit further. I don't want to necessarily dark or lighten the whole sky. I really just want this to look like it is being illuminated from here. So I want it to fade out into the surrounding sky. So that's why I just want to make sure that I had enough to get me out there a little bit, but I don't want to make it all too light. So just kind of controlling that quantity, and if you want yours lighter or darker than mine, that's totally fine. But utilizing this tan color to start this off is going to allow it to look, when I put the white on there, it'll allow that white to look even brighter. So I'm thinking that this is pretty good. And again, if you wanted to add more, you certainly could. And now what I'm going to do, without washing my brush, I'm picking up a tiny bit of white paint. So very little bit of white paint on the tip of my brush. And I'm going to decide where I want that center to be. So I'm going to have it right about in through here. So I'm just kind of tapping in my bright white in through here. You might find a rubbing technique is better for you. If your base, that tan, is still really wet, you might want to wait a minute to do this, but I think mine is dry enough for me to get this on here now. So I'm just kind of tapping it in, and I don't necessarily want this dramatic circle a clean circle. I'm just getting mine to kind of dissipate or fade out into the bright or into the rest of the light. So you can use a tapping, you can use a rubbing, whatever kind of works for you to get it to be brightest in the middle and then fade out. And now what I'm going to do, making sure that this is kind of on the drier side, I'm going to start pulling out these beams of light. So I'm going to use the remnants on my brush, and if when you start to do this, if it doesn't pull out the way that you want to, you can certainly add a little bit of water or liquid medium to your brush to get it to pull. But I'm going to just start with the remnants on my brush and see if I can start the process of the beams of light. And I don't, you can see it's very faint for me right now, so I am going to actually add a little bit more paint on my brush. The beams of light can be made with both your tan and your white. So I'm going to start with a touch of tan to just get a little bit of those beams coming out. You could certainly add a touch of water on your brush, again, whatever works for you, but the beams of light would be coming out from here. So I just have a bit of that tan, a tiny bit of water, and I'm just kind of pulling these out. You can get them to cross over your clouds if you want to. You can get them to come really far out. It's going to be a preference on your part how dramatic or subtle you want these to be, but right now I'm just kind of giving myself this nice display of them, and in a minute I'll put more white on it. But right now, and I'm kind of doing mine like out this way as opposed to that back region, so you could again play with yours in whatever directions that you want. But now that I've got that on there, I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of the white paint and give a little bit more brightness as these beams are coming out of that center. So again, I'm not touching my canvas very hard. I actually am using my hand to brace myself so I don't push too hard. That's just a little trick of mine that helps me to stay in control. And if this brush is too big for you and is making lines that are a little bit too wide for your visual preference, you could certainly utilize a smaller brush. So that'll be up to you as well. And then you just fiddle with it until you feel like you've got that light as bright as you want it. And then we're going to be utilizing the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful light on here, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to put the highlights on our clouds and our steps. So we're kind of finishing those two aspects. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm going to use are that tan color, white, and probably my my dark blue as well. So really what I'm looking to do is illuminate the clouds and the steps based on my light source. So the top part of my steps, I'm really just going to have these very light polka dots kind of on the tops of the steps. But as I come down the stairwell, I'll have more brightness kind of in the center of these steps. And then it'll be bright as I come down here, but I'll concentrate that lightness in the center of the steps, and I won't necessarily go all the way white on these bottom ones because they're farther away from the light than the steps up here. Same thing with the clouds. I'm going to lighten the edges along the stairwell, but I'm going to put my brightest stuff up towards the top where it's facing that light source. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to start with a little bit of that tan color on my brush. So this will just really kind of get my head straight as to where I want these lighter areas, and then I will finesse them after that. So I have a little bit of that tan color. I know that I want a lot of these clouds that are facing the sun or the light to have highlights to them. So I just am going to be utilizing a bit of this tan color in the edges of these clouds and making sure that they kind of blend out into the neighboring color, and all the while knowing that I'm still going to put a bright white highlight on top of them as well, the ones that are the closest to the light. And I'm kind of watching what I did with that original footprint. So I have already kind of a lighter area in through here. I have a lighter area in through here. So you can utilize those type of areas to just, and you can enhance them with this additional bit of brightness, and that'll give you that fullness to the clouds. I'm going to put some of this coming down in through these, the edges of my staircase, and allowing it to kind of dissipate out into the darkness. And again, it doesn't have to be as bright as mine. It doesn't have to be exactly the same formation that I'm doing with mine, but this just kind of gives you that idea of where that bright stuff is going to go. I just reloaded my brush with that tan so I can do the ones on this left hand side as well. So again, I want the edges that are kind of facing that facing the light source to have a bit more brightness on them. I'm not pressing my brush into my canvas really hard, but I am kind of steering that brightness towards the light source, so that way, again, it'll tell the viewer what's happening and where this lightness is coming from. And there's no two cloud formations the same, so you can certainly make yours look different than mine. Maybe you want yours to be more vibrant than mine. Maybe you want yours to be darker than mine. That's going to be totally up to you. You can bring them as bright as you want or as subtle as you want. And then I'm just going to kind of make sure that this whole area down where it's meeting the stairs has a bit of brightness too. I haven't reloaded my brush. I'm really just utilizing that the remnants on my brush from when I was working up top. And what's happening, because I haven't reloaded my brush, it appears to get darker and darker the farther away that it goes, because it's thinning out on my brush. I do want to put some in the stairs as well, but right now just kind of getting my head straight with what I want to do with these guys over here and here. Maybe I'll put a little bit of lightness in through there. And the trick with clouds is just giving them a lot of dimension to them and lots of fluffiness down in through here. I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of the tan plus my background blue, so that way I can get this to have the lightness, but maybe not go quite as light as the stuff up there. So that background blue plus a little bit of my that tan color, and just making sure that I've got as much of this, you know, information as I want in these steps as they're coming down in through here. I'm going to add a bit of this lightness on these steps in the center, because I think that's pretty good with how I've transitioned that lighter color on the clouds themselves. So now I'm in essence kind of put the clouds on the steps and the highlights on these steps. So I'm just using, right now I've got that tan color, and I know that my paint is on the translucent side, so it's because I'm using this thin scrubbing type of technique, it's going to allow the viewer to see some of the colors that are underneath it. So as long as I don't go with too heavy paint, I can, with too much paint on my brush, I can provide this beautiful airiness to it with this tan color. I'll be putting little bits of white as I go up the steps as they close in on that light source a little bit more, but I'm concentrating on putting the lightness in the center of the step and then kind of getting it to fade out a little bit towards the edges where the clouds might be piling up or creating these little stairs themselves. And of course, you'll see something different in your own head. Maybe yours turn out to be way more fluffier than mine, or have a bit more information or a bit more maybe you want yours to be purple. You know, you can really provide this beautiful atmospheric dimension with insinuating little different types of tonal colors throughout those steps, so feel free to do that. And if you wanted them darker around the sides, you could certainly do that. I'm picking up a little bit more of that tan plus blue just down here, so I can give a little bit more detail on these clouds down in through here that are just making their way into the stairwell, just so it really gives this fluffiness to it. And then I think that's pretty good. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white paint on my brush now as I'm going up towards the center of these steps. I just picked up white. If your brush is overloaded, you might want to wash it, but I like my colors to talk to each other, so I just picked up a little white on my brush, and I'm gonna just kind of give myself a bit of a highlight in the bright center of these steps, like they're being illuminated by that beautiful light that's up above. And again, if this bristle brush is a little bit too big for you, you could certainly switch to your smaller brush. And as I work my way up these little steps, I'm really just doing a little tiny dot of the white paint on the top, what I'm in my head seeing as the top side of the steps, just going right towards this beautiful light up in through here. And you could, if you needed to, add more dark blue on the bottom side just to give it a little bit more dimension. Now with that white on my brush, I'm going to illuminate the edges of some of these clouds. So I just have the white on my brush, and I'm just going to really tap it in these, you know, a variety of little areas around the steps. So it looks like these are getting illuminated the most by that light source, so something like this. And I'm just trying to get it to look like it's naturally morphing into these steps, utilizing a touch of this white on my brush to tell that story. I'll pick up a little bit more white so I can get these ones over in through here to have that beautiful brightness to them without going too much. I want that light source to be the star, but I also want there to be the information that it is illuminating these clouds as well. So just kind of tapping it in some of these edges so you can feel the fluffiness to it, and just getting it to blend into some of these steps. And this is one of those things that you may want to do it a little bit, step away, let it dry for a minute, because sometimes when the paint dries, it really does something that, you know, may take on a look that you weren't totally expecting. I'm picking up a little bit more of that tan color just so I can get these little clouds over here to transition down into the darker region so that it doesn't stay too white, but I still have this lightness on the edges. And I'm thinking that that's pretty good. I might let it dry and fiddle with it a little bit more, but look at it from a distance, see if there's anything additional that I want to add, but that's the gist of it. So you can fiddle with yours as much as you want, and then we're going to actually be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your clouds finished and your steps are illuminated and have as much little airiness to them as you want, you can wash and dry, or actually put the large brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint some beautiful doves. I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors I'm going to use are white, brown, orange, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do just a white base for them, and then we'll add a little bit of detail to it after that. So I'm going to load my brush with white paint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 3 of them kind of as if they were flying out of this beautiful heavenly area, and they're just kind of guiding perhaps something to come to the light. So I'm going to have 3. I'm going to have my first one right about in this vicinity. So how I'm going to start all of them is by just doing a line for the body that's maybe about, I would say, an inch, inch and a half long. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little tail that's going to have a triangular type of shape to it. I'm going to do a couple of wings, and you can certainly have your wings going out as far as you want. They can be coming out in different directions, whatever works for you. So I just kind of put diagonal lines as the wings, and then I'm going to shape the wings with these little bits of this little feathery type of brush strokes coming down towards where that top of the triangle meets that tail part. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, maybe getting them a little bit longer as they meet the body part. And if you have a bit of the head that you want to make a little bit larger, you can certainly puff that out a little bit. And we'll be adding more detail to it in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and do my next one. So my next one I'm going to have a little bit higher up in the sky, and I'm going to start this with just a vertical type of a line, maybe not so much diagonal, and again just maybe about an inch and a half long. I'm going to put my little tiny tail on the bottom portion of it, so just a little triangular type of section, and then I'm going to have my wings coming out just a little bit below that head. So maybe this one kind of comes out, and maybe this one's more in an upward motion, so we're going to put one there, and then maybe this one kind of comes out and up. And of course you could start these with your chalk if you wanted to, but I think I'm I'm digging, just kind of going for the whole let happen what's going to happen on these beautiful wings, because they're just nice and airy. I'm bringing this all the way down to that where the top of the tail starts. I'm going to give myself these little feathers coming off of here, and then make sure my head has a little bit of width to it. It doesn't have to have much, but just a teeny tiny width to it will totally work. And then I'm going to have one on this left hand side. So this one I'm going to have maybe flying in a little bit different direction. So I'm going to have this one maybe with a left hand diagonal line, something like this. I'm going to have my tail coming out this way. And of course you can really have fun with the direction of your tails, with the width of your wings. Whatever is really speaking to you is totally fine. And then I'm going to put this this wing on a little bit coming out in this direction. And again, knowing I'm going to have the body on there in a little bit. This one I'm going to have going over in this direction. Maybe this one's not quite as long as that one because we're seeing it from the side. And then I'm going to approach it the same way, with giving myself these beautiful wings that kind of meet the top of that tail part, something like this. And then the same thing on this side, just getting that to meet where that tail part is. And then I'm going to thicken up that head a little bit so it's not too small, so something like that. So once you've got your shapes of your beautiful doves on here, you can certainly modify them as much as you want to. But once you've got them on there, what we're going to do is just add a little bit of detail to them. Not much, just a little tiny bit. So I'm going to wash and dry my brush. What I'm first going to do is kind of give these little shadowy areas. So I'm going to use a tiny bit of brown paint on my brush. I'm going to give myself the shape of the body by doing these little outlines around the body. I'm going to put a little shadow on the tail and maybe a little bit in those wings. So where the tail meets the body, I'm just going to put a tiny bit of brown paint right in through here. That's going to separate that tail from the body. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of outline where I want that body to be with a teeny bit of brown paint. And then I'll just rub that brown paint a little bit, maybe on the underside of that wing. So not much, just a teeny tiny bit. And that allows for that shape of that body to show up. So I'm going to do the same thing on the next bird. So just a little bit of brown paint, put a tiny bit of it in that where the tail meets the body. I'm going to outline my body. So something like this, just kind of give that center section a little bit of an oval type of an area. Then bring that brown paint, rub it out into that wing, the underside of that wing a little bit. So I'm leaving a little bit of white at the top part of the wing. And then we'll put a little face detail on it in a minute, but this is just going to get those wings to really pop out. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this one over here. So same thing, just a little bit of brown paint on my brush, putting it right at that tail where the tail meets the main body. This one's a little bit to the side, so I'm going to make my body shape to the side. So I've got a little bit of an outline there. I've got a little bit of an outline over here, and then I'll just rub that paint in a little bit on that underside of the wing. So now that I've got my bodies all nice and formed, I want to put a little tiny bit of detail for the claws and the face. So I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to put a tiny bit of orange paint on my brush, and I'm going to put some little claws and beaks. So I've got a tiny bit of orange paint, and really what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right to the top of that brown section where the body meets the tail and just kind of tap in couple of little pieces of the orange, and then I'm going to put a beak on wherever I want that beak to be, whatever direction. So I think I'm just going to have this one kind of going out to the right a little bit. You might not even see these tiny details, but it's fun to just kind of add them in. I'm going to put a little bit of tiny orange right in through here, a little tiny beak. Maybe this beak is going off to the left. Then I'm going to go ahead and do this one. This one's got his little tiny feet right here, and then this one's beak is going to go in this direction. Now I need to give him an eye, so I'm going to wipe my brush off, pick up a tiny bit of black paint, and I'm just doing this itty bitty tiny dot for the eye. My hand is even shaking right now. It's just a little tiny dot. Oh yeah, there we go. Tiny dots are hard to do. So if you have a shaky hand like I do, brace yourself on your canvas. And you can always paint over it if it goes a little bit too big. Like that one's a little bit too big, but I want his head bigger too. So I'm just adding white around the base. There we go. And then we have one tiny little step left to go. So once you've got your beautiful birds in here, you can wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I typically sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I think I'm going bottom right, and I think I'm going to use my tan plus my dark blue. So I have tan plus my dark blue on my brush. I sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be is totally fine. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a beautiful heavenly image, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.